feel like I should sing right at those early moments because I realize that even when it's not telling me that I'm live yet, I am, which I find out later when I'm watching the video. So then I'm like awkwardly moving around, looking around. Next time I'm going to start singing, whether you like it or not. Anyway, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode of Whiskey and Weird. This is episode 3, I believe, of this new season. And as you may know, if you were waiting to show up tonight, our episode is going to be at the suggestion of my amazingly talented daughter, Emily, who, by the way, was just participating in a cool concert, which I was listening to right before I got on the show. She's in a cappella group at her school, University of Missouri, from which she is about to graduate. Super proud of her. If we're lucky, she might make an appearance here later tonight. So I'm hoping. If not, that's cool. That's cool. But anyway, welcome. We're going to be talking about the multiverse. Now, of course, that idea comes from Emily because she's a huge Marvel fan, and particularly Spider-Man, I think, would be accurate. But of course, the multiverse is something that's not just significant or particular to Marvel, right? So anyway, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to dive into a conversation about multiverse, parallel universes, the many worlds theory, all of this in a few minutes. But I did get some whiskey to try tonight. So hopefully some of you might chime on. Some of you might be bringing your own whiskey. Maybe you'll get here before I drink it all myself. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, I was going with a theme. I'm always trying to figure out, I go to the liquor store and there's so many to choose from. Like, how does one decide these things? I decided in the end to go with a theme. Those of you who follow my page on Facebook or Instagram might have seen that I tried Bird Dog whiskey earlier this week, and kind of little hunting camp theme. All that. Hi, Kathleen, aka Katie Pat. It's good to have you here. Yes, you definitely need to grab a Jameson. So yeah, I went with a theme, and I chose a blended straight bourbon whiskey from the Old Elk Distillery in Colorado. But it's, it apparently has won a lot of awards and stuff. So it's going to be pretty good. Interestingly, in the last episode, we talked a little bit, like really briefly, about the fact that just because a whiskey is more expensive does not necessarily mean that it's better, right? It really just means that it's been in a barrel or whatever longer, it aged longer. And, the longer it sits, the more people have to care for it, the more things have to happen, all of that. So the Bird Dog that we tried, it was like under $20. It was actually really pleasant. I have some notes on my page about that. So I'm kind of curious because this was not under $20. It was actually a $50 bottle of whiskey. So it better be damn good, is all I'm saying. I'm sure it will be lovely. But it's, let's see what it says here. Anything about how long it was. Oh, not a lot on here, but we'll see. I don't like to read too many notes on the back because I don't want it to influence my tasting experience, right? So cool little cork lid on there. Little picture. Sorry, I have to get used to the way my new camera is on here. See that? Cool little lid with the logo. Even if you're on for just a minute, you guys, say hi. Kind of makes me feel better about this whole thing when people say hello. So say hi. What are you drinking? Are you drinking whiskey with me tonight like Kate is? Or are you going to try something else? Oh, I almost forgot to sniff it. Ready? It smells there's a little fruity to me. sweet, maybe some vanilla. It's always interesting to, the nose right out of the bottle is always just so particular, and not always what you get when you take a little sniff later. So that's weird. So the fruity's gone. Almost get a little vanilla and spice in there. Not a lot of the ones that I've been trying lately have had a lot of caramely sweetness to them. This one, a little vanilla, a little spicy. That's okay. We like spicy up in here, right? All right. Let's see. There's a lot of warmth right away. I definitely get the hint of like the vanilla and some spicy. I'm not really good at naming which spice. It's just like kind of almost like I don't know. Sometimes it just reminds me of fall or whatever. But there's a little spice, some spicy notes to that. Not spicy hot, but like, cinnamons, whatever. And some vanilla. I don't get, like, when I first opened the bottle, the nose, there was almost a floral thing there. I didn't get that. It's not, it feels pretty smooth in the mouth, and just a real quick hint of a burn when you finish. So it's actually pretty nice. And as far as comparing it to the Bird Dog and the fact that this was 2.5 times more expensive, not a better experience necessarily, just different. I think both are enjoyable. Probably more likely to take Bird Dog out to hunting camp, though, because it was only $18 for the bottle. But this is pretty good. Pretty good. Sláinte. So anyway, if you are here, please say hi. Say hi. I won't put you on the spot. I'll just say hi back to you. But if you're just joining, you guys, I just tried a little bit of Old Elk. This is their blended straight bourbon whiskey, and I'll put my tasting notes on here later when we're done with the broadcast. Hi, Jonas. That's pretty funny. I'm going to put this up here because it's super funny. Would love to see Napoleon Dynamite do a whiskey tasting instead of the milk contest from the movie. Yeah, totally. That would be really great. That's funny. Maybe I should set up my whiskey tasting someday too, to mimic Napoleon Dynamite. Thanks for saying hi, Jonas. Anyway, I'm going to keep tasting my whiskey, sipping my whiskey, so I hope you are. I imagine Jonas is drinking some whiskey too right now, probably not milk. But we're going to get started on our conversation about the multiverse. Someone else just joined. You guys say hi. Say hi if you're here. I love to say hi back, and I'm really grateful when you show up even for a minute. So just pop in, say hi. Yeah, grab a drink if you want and hang out for a little bit. So the multiverse. Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts about the multiverse, but of course, because I'm getting on here and I am decided to do this topic, I was like, I should probably do a little research, a little investigating, into the whole quantum physics, the science part, and started reading stuff about is there a difference between the multiverse and the many worlds theory? Okay, so here's what I have to say about science, and I and I apologize if I offend anyone, or if I object to things you believe in, I guess. But like people often claim, I'm gonna just trust the science. All right, science is not static. Like there's like I want to hear one thing that science has discovered with just irrefutable proof that everyone can attest to that hasn't changed in some way, shape, or form at some point or other. Now, I was thinking about even things like the galaxy, right? Because this kind of coming into this conversation and the planets and the blah, 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 right? We have evidence that this suggests, or that this, to suggest that this is real, but it's really just evidence unless you yourself have been to the moon and touched it. Is that proof? I don't know. It seems really subjective to me. I'm not saying I don't believe the moon exists, but I think science is always changing, always shifting, always proving new things, changing truths for people. And it's often a very narrow focus in my mind. Like, you often have people just looking at one aspect of a bigger truth. And so much of that can be different just by perspective. Perspective is everything. And so the notion for me of going into the science and trying to use that really felt very unnatural for me personally, a little uncomfortable. Hi, Chelsea Marie. Welcome. Glad you're here. Team Haunt Paranormal. That sounds awesome. I am originally from Seattle. Well, originally spent the last 30 years there. So thank you so much for joining my show tonight. I appreciate it. So anyway, we're talking multiverse, right? And I was just saying how for me, the science it doesn't matter. I mean, that's why I think these conversations are so much more fun in this kind of arena, because it doesn't matter, right? Like, we can just sit here and chat about all these different ideas and perspectives and our own experience with all of these things, and just have some fun. And the truth is, I got online earlier today, did a little Google search, right? Like, ooh, let's check out the quantum physics and the science behind the notion of parallel universes. And it was utterly confusing. And I will tell you, there were no two articles that said the same thing. And a lot of them contradicted each other. I even posted this little video earlier of a guy. I thought, oh, this is cool. It's short and sweet. Might be good for me, right? And then I read an article later with the same guy in there, and the article literally said, oh, he changed his mind about this. And I was like, well, that's really helpful. So anyway, there we go. Totally cool. You can change your mind. But kind of proves my point that, scientists are just changing their mind. How much should we rely on what they have to tell us? I tend to want to trust my intuition and what I just naturally, intuitively perceive about the world, and go with it. And does it change sometimes? Absolutely. If I hear new things, experiencing new things, totally 100%. But it's a way more fun conversation. But I'm going to do my best to try to explain some of these different concepts. If you're listening in tonight and you love the science approach and you know the scientific terminology for that particular theory that I'm talking about, please pop it into the comments, because that will help me and provide something that I can't provide to the audience. So please do that. Anyway, I find this topic really fascinating, and I was at my favorite local brewery last night, and always chat about my show with one of the bartenders, and asked him, of course, asked him what he thinks of parallel universes. Of course, he was like, oh, I love this topic. And he went into all this conversation about quantum physics and stuff. But I shared with him a story just about how fascinating this has been to me for a really long time. I can remember being a little kid, probably 3rd to 5th grade, somewhere in there, because I was in school overseas at the time. And I very distinctly, this day in school, board in class, like I always was, which you probably could imagine it was the case for a person like me. I think a lot of people were bored in school. They're not really very good at it. But I sat there and I had this pencil, and I was putting my pencil at the top of my desk and letting it roll down. And I remember doing it and doing it and doing it, probably driving someone around me crazy, if not the teacher. And I at one point started thinking, if I pause, because I probably gotten kind of a routine of putting it up and rolling it, kind of a pattern or whatever, a rhythm, and thought, ooh, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait 10 seconds this time in between. I'm going to go throw off the pattern a little bit. And I wonder if it will change my life. Will it change the course of my day? Will it change my life? Will it, but I was like 9 when I was having these thoughts. So raise your hand, you guys. Give me a like if these are things you ever thought about when you were a little kid, or anytime as a young person. Like, there were things you thought about and you're like, what is that? Why would that happen? And so it became apparent to me. It was like intuitively I realized, Kate says yes. I realized that, every little moment that we make a choice, when something happens, we are completely creating new paths in this timeline. So in this space-time realm. Now, some people believe that there's still another version of me going the other way, or another version of me going this way, right? And maybe there are. That's like the whole fascinating thing about that. And we'll, like, if we're doing that, if we can alter all these different paths, what does that really look like in the time-space continuum, right? Like, is can you see it from the outside somehow in some matrixy kind of way? But hi, Isaiah. You know what? We are talking about just multiverse in general, parallel universes. But to answer your question, my daughter Emily might hop on later, and she might have something to say about Marvel multiverses, because she's the one that came up with this. Great question. Not entirely different. It's actually the same kind of thing, right? The multiverses of the Marvel universe are really what we are talking about, just not specifically to Marvel, right? To Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and all that kind of stuff. But awesome question. And they are one and the same, right? So multiverses. So Kate asked me, thanks for that question, Isaiah. I'm glad you're here. Kate just said, does that mean that there should be a different end if you choose not to make that choice? I'm going to pop Isaiah's question up here too for people who watch it later, can see that if they didn't hear it. So Isaiah was asking if we're talking about our multiverses or the Marvel one. So I'm talking about mine personally. No, I'm kidding. And Jonas says Spider-Verse. So Kate, let's put your thing back up here and address this for a second. So does that mean that there should be a different end if you choose not to make that choice? Right? I don't know. Like, that's a great question. Can we come back to the same place? I think it's all of that. I think that's the incredible thing, that we have opportunities. I do think, and this is always a whole nother conversation, right? Like, I can be so tangential on these things, but that when we choose, now those of you who've watched me before know that I believe that our soul chooses what's going to happen to us. We have a contract in this lifetime. So we have a specific outcome that we want to learn from this particular life, right? So we're always trying to get to that, and we could probably sway. I don't think that if you go this way at, like, say when you're 10 and you decide to I don't know, punch some kid in the face that you knew you shouldn't, and I don't think that necessarily is going to change the outcome completely. I do think that people always can kind of get back on that path. And I know that there are different ways, right? Just looking at nature, there are different ways to get to the same end. So super great question, and one to ponder. Like, what do you think, Kate? Like, what does anyone else think? Like, if we make one choice that out is a little different, is that completely going to change the whole outcome of our lives, or even the people we interact with, right? I think that's a great question, and it's exactly what we're talking about here. Isaiah says this is like every single choice we make makes a different branch or whatever. Yeah, totally, right? But it doesn't mean that those branches, like maybe creeks and rivers and whatever, how they can kind of separate and come back to the same body of water. I think it can do that too. So awesome questions. So Kate, yeah. So Kate, yeah. I think that just because there's a path chosen for us, that doesn't mean we're stuck to it. I think that's the reason that we, in my humble opinion, why we have multiple lives, because sometimes we don't get it right, or sometimes it becomes too hard and we decide to bow out early, or, that kind of thing. So, but I think that's one of the aspects of this. Now, I might be wrong, and I probably am because of stuff, but I think that's where the whole string theory approach comes in. So if anyone's listening in and you know about that, let me know. As I was doing my research today, though, when I plugged in multiverse, right, it of course says parallel universes, but it talks about the many worlds theory. And so there's these differing ideas. Now, again, they were not really clear because some people interpreted them differently. But let's say multiverse is different timelines within the space-time continuum. As I understood it, the many worlds theory means that there are galaxies far, far away, completely separate from ours, that are existing in a similar fashion, but maybe slightly different. And there could be tons of them. So that would mean and I think that actually matches a little more of what the Marvel multiverse is about, right? Like you have these different versions of all the same people, right? So they're not exactly the same. They're similar. They have the same good guys and the same bad guys, and they're moving on similar paths, but there's different things in their lives that don't completely match up. And so I think the notion of the Marvel multiverse actually matches more with this theory, as I understand it, of what many worlds are. So yeah, and if anyone knows anything about this, please chime in, because my brain just is trying to wrap around all of these notions. Jonas says, now I want to watch the old Butterfly Effect movie again, right? There's probably some really seriously cool movies out there. Now, when we think about like Time Traveler's Wife, who's seen that movie? I just thought of that movie when I read your comment, Jonas, and the whole notion of time travel, like how will that exist, right? It's been shown in whatever way. Quantum physics has shown that time travel is indeed a possibility. Now, they've only tried it with like the smallest version of living whatever so far, but they've shown that it can happen in some way, shape, or form. But what would this mean? Because the other notion of parallel universes, especially in like the realm of mysticism and stuff, when we talk about our ancestors, there's a lot of belief systems around the notion that all of the versions of ourselves, all of the so my 5-year-old self, my 50-year-old self, she doesn't exist yet, by the way. My 25-year-old version of myself, that they already do exist and they coexist all at the same time. So there's this notion in healing and everything that, Isaiah, that's funny. I'll get to that in a second. There's this notion of healing, for instance, let's say that I'm working on healing old energy, blah, 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 that when I do so, I'm actually healing my ancestors that came before me and those who are coming after me, because it's like this just collective thing that's all happening at the same exact time. But that's just like so weird. Like I can't even really, it makes sense to me on some level. Chime in if it makes sense to you guys. Or if you have a thought, please. I love your thoughts. They're awesome. Questions are spectacular. But yeah, like how weird to think that my grandma is still existing as, a young person on a different timeline at the same time. So another kind of version of what these parallel universes are, that everything is just a continuum, and it's all happening. Now, of course, that kind of throws a weird wrench in to the notion of souls coming back, to the general idea of what that means. But it just kind of makes it more complicated and more fascinating, in my opinion. Isaiah says Spider-Verse to Into the Laurenverse. This is totally where we are right now, in case you didn't realize. Totally the Laurenverse. Every Sunday at 6:00 on Whiskey and Weird. So yeah, stopping the cycle. Kate says stopping the cycle. We can do that, but that's still another completely different version of that. Now, I've said whole science thing is kind of I don't trust that as much as I trust my own intuition. And when I think about things and things come to me and they make sense, and they can simultaneously make all the sense in the world and none at all. Again, raise your hand if you know anything about what I'm talking about. So I don't feel alone and extra weird when I say stuff like that. But I think that I feel like we can't expect science to explain something like this. I find it hard to believe that there will ever be a day where science will be like, oh yeah, this is what happens, and here's how you can get over to this universe, and you can do this, and this is how it all exists. I just don't think that's going to happen, because I think that these are like just meat suits that we're in, more or less, and that all of these space-time things actually exist on an energetic level. Ooh! So I don't know. What do you think about that? It's why people believe in astral traveling and projection and things. The fact that you can actually people could claim to go to other places energetically, possibly visit other realms, visit people that they wouldn't otherwise see. So another version of that, and the fact that there's all these different places that are coexisting in the space-time continuum. Is that weird? I'm really curious what concepts I'm bringing up tonight might be completely new to you, or if it's something you're familiar with, or if you have a different experience about what a parallel universe might be. I would love to know that, because I can talk, but I love it when you guys share your ideas about that. So I always think about, this is another thing that I thought about as a child. So I lost a lot of people in my life as a young person. Family members, mostly on my mom's side, aunts and uncles and cousins, and I can remember imagining. Well, the interesting thing was I lived really far away from most of them. We lived overseas for a good chunk of my early life, and it's amazing sometimes when you aren't in the same time and space with someone, how it can still feel like they still exist, which I think is another interesting notion when you talk about these different realms, these different universes or timelines. And, then you have these moments and you're like, oh yeah, that person isn't with us here anymore. And it's kind of strange. But I can remember as a kid thinking, what if this is just, this is just this timeline? What if there's another timeline in which I exist, that all of those people are still existing too? So one second, Isaiah, I'll get to that question. But we, what if in some other place, my Uncle Tommy, my Aunt Kathy, all these people, my cousin Joey, are still alive, and they totally lived a life there. There's a certain level of comfort in that. I've also had the thought of, had these moments, you ever have those like life or death moments and you're like, oh my God, I could have died right then. What if I did die in another universe, right? Like, what if somewhere else that really just happened and my family's now going to mourn me and I'm not here anymore, but I'm going to continue with this outcome that I'm trying to seek in this particular timeline. I don't know. Anyone, you guys, you need to like confirm or affirm some of what I'm saying, because, you know, I'm seriously putting my weirdness out there tonight with this particular notions and these weird things that I think about. So Isaiah says, dun, 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 so we aren't the only different thing in all the multiverse, right? I'm not 100% sure I'm understanding that question, but I think what you're asking is, if you were going to step into another timeline, that there would be other things that were different, not just you. Is that what you're asking me? I'm not 100% sure. And if that is what you're asking me, I would say yes. I think that the sheer nature of everything being different makes it different. So, yeah. So Isaiah follows up with, like, we are not the only thing that changes multiverse to multiverse. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So things can be completely different, right? Because when we go back to that notion of, thanks for those questions, Isaiah. When we go back to the notion of like the pencil thing I told you about at the very beginning, and like that's just in this timeline, right? But if I go and, yeah, I'm born in a different multiverse to the same parents, but maybe a different day. Maybe my dad, who was in the military, had been stationed in a completely different place, and I wasn't born in England. And so that little shift is going to change all sorts of things. It's going to be different exposure for me. It's obviously different exposure to them. Yeah, so if that makes sense. Another great question. I love this, Isaiah. You should hang out with me more often on here. So then there's a universe where instead of Back to the Future, it's Onward to the Past. Absolutely. I mean, that's what people believe anyway. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's possible? But that is one belief system, especially in, like, as I said, in the mystic world, and how people view timelines and how they perceive the universe that we live in, that the past, the present, and the future are all existing simultaneously. That one is, on some level, I get it, but it's also really hard for me to wrap my head around. But I'm curious. I mean, which of these concepts would make the most sense to you, right? Do any of them make any sense? Because I mean, yeah, totally weird. Like, I don't know. I think it also comes down to this idea that, like, even choices, like, just it, like, can I say like one more time? If I make this one particular choice, right, it affects the outcome, and thereby makes me responsible for that outcome in some way, shape, or form, right? So, which I think is one reason people are really hesitant to embrace this. Cool. I'm glad that makes sense, Isaiah. Because the notion that all these different timelines could exist, even if we're just looking at this one space-time currently that we're existing on this, in this timeline, right, that we could alter just by getting up to go to the bathroom at a different time than we might otherwise, or whatever. But the fact that we do that, and to embrace the notion that it changes everything, means that every choice we make affects our reality, right? So it means we become responsible for it. And I think when you say that, like, when you tell people, when people are like, oh, my life sucks right now, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So what are you going to do to make it better? And how do you think you got here? Because, yeah, other people might make it sucky, but you also put yourself in a position to be right here, right now. I was dealing a little bit with this earlier in my day. Like, okay, I can blame everyone else, but I don't have to be right here, right now at this point. And I chose it. I chose it for a reason. And then, you know, and to me, there's comfort in that. It can suck sometimes because when bad things happen, we don't want to accept responsibility for them, but we have so much power to do what we want, to do what serves us, to what brings us joy. All of these things for me are really intertwined, right? And so I love to consider all these different these notions because they tell me that I can affect change in my own life if I want to, right? That there might be somewhere else where someone is enjoying something that maybe I can't right now, but maybe another version of me might be doing that. I don't know. Yeah. So Kate says, yeah, we are hesitant to make choices because as humans, don't we want to make the right choice? And is it right? Well, gosh, herein lies a completely new conversation, right? About what is right and what is wrong, and whether that is something that even just exists, or if it's a man-made concept. Now, if we have all these different versions of the world, of the timelines, of the many worlds, all of these things, and they're all moving forward in their own way, shape, and form, is one of them better than another, like fully? Because I have a feeling that this verse, like Lauren verse, might be perfectly splendid for me, but maybe not for the other person who's right here with me, So determining what is right and wrong, God, that's really troubling, right? I mean, and I guess you can't have a right without a wrong. You have a dark without a light, blah, blah, blah. But maybe everything just is. Again, coming back to this notion of living in the moment, like there is nothing but what is happening right here and right now. And, that gets us into a whole nother philosophical conversation about some people saying that there is no such thing as the past or the future. There's only the present. Which, you can get off on interesting tangents and branches of that. But really, to me, that is saying there is none of those because they're all existing simultaneously, right? That's where that concept really comes from. But we try to interpret it to mean, oh, don't worry about your past. Don't worry about your future because there's only now. Well, really, it's telling us it's all existing at the same time, and you have power to affect change and do things, whatever, in this particular moment. Let's see. So Kate says, is there a version of ourselves? Do we know what that choice should be? So you're asking, is there a version of yourself that has all the answers? Probably not. In my opinion, because I don't think that really serves us. I don't think it serves a purpose for us to know everything. I think it would be the same way as, and I brought this up before, I think on the show at some other point, like, when you take all of these, you take different psychics and people who have different abilities, and many of them show up really differently, right? And you can take the same person into a space, for instance, that is obviously got energy. Most people can feel it, whatnot. And they might pick up on completely different things. And it doesn't mean any of them are wrong. I believe that each of us carries with us an aspect of the whole truth. And we're meant to find a way to work together to find it. Like your truth and mine, they all coexist, and they're like pieces of a puzzle. So I think that would be the same for all the different versions of ourselves. And, each of those different versions are bringing together some different aspect of the truth, and that alone would shift what you how you lived and what you would choose, because you have a differing understanding over here than you do over here. So that's what I think. I don't think you would ever, there is no place. I think that existence is what people would consider heaven. That would be the place we go when we've completely worked through all of our lessons and we've lived 100,000 lives, whatever it is. That is what heaven is. Like, we don't have to be living and working and struggling and making choices. We're just in a state of light and being. So is this making sense to anybody? Because it's making sense to me. Let's see. Kate has another thought here. The past is what has occurred by choice. Now we can create change through choice. But again, is it the right choice? Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, everything that's happened in our past, we have a responsibility to that, whether we want to or not. Right. Maybe. And here's the thing. If you like, as a human person, it's easy to go, well, I didn't choose who were going to be my parents. I would argue, yes, in fact, you did choose them. In a different realm, in a different time, you chose who your parents would be because therein would lie all the lessons that you were choosing to learn in this lifetime. Now, I get that that's easier for me to say because I've not lived a tough life, right? It's harder for people who may have suffered abuse and all of that, and I get it. And I'm, I can't go there with them, and I'm certainly not going there right now. But I do believe it to be true. And I do believe that we're all reaching. And I think that if we're struggling in this timeline, we're going to be rewarded in another one. I really think that. I think we get to rest. Like if we make it through this shitty life, next one is probably going to be a little better. I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm going to be a millionaire with 12 homes all over the world in the next life. And, all of that. Whatever we want to choose. But I don't think there isn't always a right choice. And that's why you just go with what feels right. And you might later realize the universe is telling you, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best path, but here's the lesson you got from it, right? So again, I don't think we can narrow anything down to right or wrong. It just is what it is. And we can make it what we want it to be ultimately if we're giving it some thought and I don't know, paying attention, being reflective and introspective and meditating, all of those things. Meditation, super great way, I think, to possibly explore other lives. I mean, I've had some really cool meditative experiences where I haven't necessarily been in a different life, but I've gone to different realms. And that's the other thing too, like where does the notion, like people talk about the fact that there are other planets, right? Have you ever heard like the notion of, oh, you lived your last life on the water planet. That's why you're really into the ocean and you communicate with dolphins or whatever, which is a really beautiful concept. And why couldn't it be true? And is that considered, like going back to some of Isaiah's questions, like I would be the same soul in that. And there would be other souls there that were completely familiar to me, I believe. But obviously, a water planet is completely different than what we are experiencing here. And is that what they mean when they talk about the many worlds idea? There's some people that talk about how we're all bugs on a planet and why people have these different weird connections and memories to things that seem really bizarre, might be really attuned to nature because you were a tree last time on a different planet, or maybe on this planet. There's another idea. So all these concepts really intertwine, right? And we could go round and round, but getting back to the whole multiverse, parallel universe thing. I think it's kind of cool to daydream about the fact that, is another version of me doing Whiskey and Weird right now? Are they talking about parallel universes? Is it the same people chiming in? Maybe in another world, like I have thousands of people following me. Or maybe in another one, I'm not even doing this at all, right? And it gets you just thinking about what going back to what's the right choice for me right now? I guess if you want to talk about right and wrong, what's the right choice for me right now, and how's that feeling? But yeah, it's really fascinating. There's so many different notions, and I think for every possibility that I have even touched on tonight, I feel like there could be 20 others, right? And like I said, for me, it comes down really to my intuition, because when you can go and you can look up something scientifically, right? And you can find 80 different perspectives on how you would define that. It doesn't make science any different to me than each of us here listening into the show having a different idea about parallel universes, whether they're, many worlds, just different timelines or different strings in the same, timeline or whatever. It doesn't really prove anything because they can't even agree, right? So I think that it's a pretty cool topic. I was really hoping my M&M would jump on because I wanted to discuss the whole Marvel multiverse thing for a minute, because I totally loved, okay, if you're into Marvel and you watched Spider-Man, I think they do the last one, right, where all three of the different versions came into the same. That was pretty awesome. I think that they do a really good job because they get to the whole notion of what we've had questions, a couple from Isaiah, about, how much changes and why, and, you might look different. You might actually be, different hair, maybe a little taller, a little shorter. I don't know how that would work. But you might live with your parents. You might not live with your parents. And I think that I think the whole way that they do that universe thing is I think it's pretty typical to how people perceive the whole parallel universe. Would you guys agree with that? I think that it's a pretty cool notion to realize that, a lot of things will be similar, but nothing's going to be exactly the same. And you might have, I think that just is one of the easiest ways to kind of wrap your head around that. Now, is it possible to travel? Like, what if you could switch places with other versions of yourself and come into these new worlds? There was a show I watched, the OA, and it kind of dealt a little bit with the notion of different versions of yourself and how you can really be playing out completely different scenarios in those. And actually, going back to your thought, Kate, about if there's a version of us that knows the right choice, I certainly think that there are going to be planes of higher vibration, right? Like you could go someplace, and generally speaking, it's a version of most people that's just vibrating a little higher than where like we are right now. And you can get into these whole conversations about the whole 3D, 4D, 5-dimensional aspect of that, and people becoming more attuned to their higher versions of their self, people who then are able to do this astral projection stuff or whatever. But gosh, it's super fascinating, right? But, it's funny how people will be on either side of this conversation. When I asked my bartender friend last night about it, he went straight to the quantum physics part and tried to tell me about a 10-page article I should read, which I couldn't remember the name of the scientist or anything, but I probably wouldn't have read it because it probably would have been too much information for my brain. That didn't make any sense. I tend to like to feel my way through things usually, and that it's fascinating. If someone can explain it to me or show it to me in pictures or something, I might get it. But when you get into those articles and they have all this technical language and symbols and shit, I don't know what that means. It's really crazy. I wish I did. And I'm really bummed that we don't have Lisa Heineman on here tonight, because she is my resident scientist. And I was totally hoping that she would show up and chat about it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's all I got for now, you guys. Maybe I should just have a sip of my whiskey. Hope you guys are enjoying your drinks. But super glad that you guys chimed in. Was she here? She didn't say hi. Lisa was here, but she didn't say hi to me. Darn it. Yeah, and I can't see, like, apparently you guys can see who's getting on. I can't see that. But I'm super glad you guys are here. Thanks for your awesome questions, Isaiah. It was awesome to have you. Come back next week. I'm not sure what next week's episode will be on yet. It'll just come to me. But if you have a suggestion, hi, Emily. Emily's here. Do you want to get on in and talk multiverse with me for a minute? If you do, just click your link in Messenger, and I would love to get you on and get your perspective. We have at least one person that might be interested in hearing about that. So, but I'd love to have you on. You have really spectacular timing, because I was just about to wrap this up. See, Isaiah would like us to talk about the Marvel Universe, multiverse. So hop on, my kid. Get on here, and we can do that. See what Emily has to say. She's pretty brilliant. I don't know where she came from. She somehow is my kid, but are you coming on, Eminem? Anyway, you guys, let me know. Actually, what should we talk about next week? You tried and it wasn't letting you. Oh man. Whoop. Yeah, I don't know if I can send it to you again while I'm in here. So that might not work. That might not work, you guys. Let's see. Went. Can you guys see me? Hold on. I'm going to email it to you, Em. This is funny. I can't see you guys, but you can see me. Maybe that's not going to work. Yeah, you know what, Em? If it's not working, that totally sucks. But I can't send it to you because I'm on my Whiskey and Weird Google Space and I'd have to sign in. So, what? Try it again. And then, what do you think? Can you type really fast? I know you can, because you're a journalist. Type really fast. Like, what's your thought on how the Spider-Man multiverse actually represents the general understanding of parallel universes and that kind of thing? Because I know you've thought about it before. So I'm going to give you a second to do that. Ooh, here she is. Hi there, babe. Hold on. Let's bring her in.
Hi.
I'm in the room. Okay, there's my girl. So I was just asking. So we've talked about the whole, all the parallel universe stuff, right? But I was just saying a minute ago, because about to wrap up, I wasn't sure you'd get on. Like, I think that the multiverse in Marvel, like the way they did the Spider-Man movies, and you have these three different completely different versions, is a really kind of valid depiction of what most people perceive parallel universes to look like, right? Like, it's a version of you, but different, and everything's different. And I mean, I don't know that we would look completely different. I think we would look more similar. But what are your thoughts about that in particular? I know Isaiah's on, and he would really love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Like on Marvel's depiction of it?
Yeah. Like, specifically, like, what do you think about those universes, and what your thoughts on how that might depict reality, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it makes sense that like multiple different things in our life,
You're totally breaking up. Just talk slower. There you go.
So there's always butterfly choices. Mm-hmm. And I was joking with someone at a teleconcert that,
sorry, go ahead. You're kind of breaking up a little bit, and I know what you're saying is absolutely brilliant, so I want to make sure everybody can hear it.
As there's always butterfly effects with the choices you're making. And so as I was leaving my acapella concert, I was talking with someone, and I was like, I wonder what the Emily who didn't get into the naturals is doing. Like, what is that Emily variant doing right now? Like did she, how much more time did she have? How much more sleep did she get? Like, we were joking about all the things we've given up for 4 years that us in other universes would have been getting to enjoy because they hadn't decided to join this group. So I think it definitely makes sense that there would be these similarities between like the different universes, which would obviously be infinite because there's so many people in the world and so many decisions you make like in a day. Like me deciding to get on this call is like has a butterfly effect in itself. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's definitely interesting. And this is going to stray a little bit from that question, but it's something that I saw recently, someone like theorizing about on TikTok that I thought was really interesting. Because like obviously Marvel's kind of like the first to be diving into multiverse stuff, but there are other like movies coming out that are getting ready to do that. Like A24 just released a film called Everything Everywhere All at Once that I've heard is really good. I haven't gone to see it yet, but it's also like a multiverse type thing, and there are a lot of other movies that are going to explore that, and so it's going to become kind of like a genre in itself. And this person was theorizing that multiverse movies are our culture's reaction to the pandemic in the same way that superhero movies were the reaction to 9/11, and zombie movies and media were a reaction to the 2008 recession. And that like it's we're going to see a lot of it over the next couple of years because people want to imagine, well, what would life have been like if we didn't just spend 2+ years and now forever indefinitely stuck in a pandemic, or stuck with COVID-19, not necessarily a pandemic anymore. It will become an endemic. But so that was interesting to me.
That is actually really fascinating. And I mean, I hadn't heard that specific theory, but I've certainly read about and heard about other ones. Like there's always a real life motivation to the trends, right? In art and culture and all, how that stuff comes about. But that's really fascinating. And of course, because that's what people do. You daydream and you're like, man, if I would, I would be doing this, right? And maybe in another timeline we were doing that. Maybe I did a lot of conversation about how like science versus intuition, right? In a conversation like this, maybe in another timeline we already had the science for that. Earlier today, this makes me think of it. Earlier I'm looking at soap. I had to buy hand soap and I was like, nothing. Remember, for the longest time it was all antibacterial hand soap, and now that's not really a thing. And I was wondering, I'm like, maybe if we had never used antibacterial soap, maybe we would have had better immune systems. And the COVID-19, like it was just things that you think of. And I think that because we think of them, that we might be putting them into reality in some other version of the timeline, right? Like, or the reason we think of it is because that timeline actually exists. But yeah, but I think, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's kind of like the theory around one theory around like deja vu. When you get deja vu, it's that you've like another version of you has already experienced that, and that's why like it feels familiar, but there's often like something that's a little off about it, or like like it hasn't actually happened to you, and it doesn't feel like a dream. It just feels like it happened. So that's interesting to think about too.
Or even when you just have dreams that are all like feel very real, but complete, like with people that don't quite match up to what you're experiencing. Those are really fascinating to consider too. So here's a question about the whole multiverse thing. And this is a total Marvel question, because Jonas said the other day that he thinks Doctor Strange is still stuck. The real Doctor Strange is still stuck in the other. Do you think that's the case? Is that your prediction?
Yeah, like he's referencing like What If, and what happens in What If, which you should probably watch, by the way. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely the theory. It's not necessarily that the real Strange is like trapped somewhere, but that the like evil Strange that is in like the What If universe is loose as a result of what happened in No Way Home and what happened in the Loki TV series, with the multiverse cracking, and that Doctor Strange, I mean, it's confirmed to be in the movie. It's unclear like if it's like a reveal that he's been Strange the whole time, or if it will be like a two Strange thing in the way that like there was multiple Peters or whatever. But I mean, like in the trailer they show evil What If Doctor Strange, so like it's confirmed that that's happening. It's just kind of like a matter of how. And then like also if they do it with Wanda, is like a popular theory as well, like if there'll be two Wandas.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to consider that they could have capitalized on that whole theory, the multiverse, in all the movies, like even in Endgame and stuff, right? They could have brought in these different these different people, the same, they have different versions of themselves, right? Isaiah says, I don't know what this is referring to, but you might. I want to see a multiverse where Moon Knight is the avatar for a different Egyptian god. Who's Moon Knight? Do you know who that is?
Yeah, it's the newest Marvel TV show that's out right now. It has Oscar Isaac in it.
See, I had no idea.
Yeah, he plays Moon Knight. Well, yeah, Moon Knight. It's kind of complicated, but he plays this character who's like an avatar for the Egyptian god of the moon or whatever, the stars, the moon, space night, and he has multiple personality disorder. He has DID, so like they're like it's really interesting. I think you'd really like it, but yeah, hold on, that comment popped away. Yeah, he's Jewish. That is true. It's kind of laid back in the show, but there are references to him being Jewish. But him being an avatar, like for a different Egyptian god, would just be like if they switched. Like Ethan Hawke is in it, Mom. I'm surprised you haven't heard about it.
I probably have heard it. I love Ethan Hawke. Yeah. I'll have to check it out. Yeah. So that's awesome. Cool. All right. Well, that was great. I'm glad you could chime in just for a minute. I should probably let people go, but you can watch later and comment on all the other stuff. But it's fun. It's fun to kind of tie those things together or whatever, the whole multiverse and all that cool stuff. Like if we could capitalize on that. Kate asked a question earlier. She was like, do you think there's a version of ourselves that that knows everything, right? That just knows all the right choices. And I was like, no, I don't think that's, I think we all have some aspect of the truth. And collectively, it, makes up our full being or whatever. But anyway, thanks for chiming in, my sweet girl. That was really fun. And I'm sure Isaiah appreciates it because you can talk about things that I cannot. So I don't know. We might have to chat, Isaiah. I want to learn more about this. And what's this thing called? What If?
It's one of the Marvel TV shows. So it's the animated one. And it's like, what if Peggy Carter took the super soldier serum instead of Steve? What if there were zombies? It's all based off of like other like random like one-off Marvel comic arcs. But then now is probably going to get brought in through like the multiverse thing. So
cool. I'll totally check it out. That's awesome. All right. Thank you. Go on and enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll see you soon, my sweet girl.
Love you.
All right. Love you too. All right, everybody. I think that's a wrap for tonight. I'm super stoked that my girl got to get on here. It's totally changed all of our futures, just so you know. But some cool things to think about. I love your idea of haunted dolls, Mr. Isaiah Freeman. And actually, it could be a cool opportunity for me to bring my friend Pete back on, because his show, I Want to Believe, they've recently been doing some episodes on haunted objects. If I could manage to get some of the big wigs like Greg and Dana Newkirk, or even Zach, because his haunted museum on here, wouldn't that be so cool? Probably in some other universe. I know those people on a really like personal level, right? So anyway, I'm really glad you guys are all here. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for chiming in and participating. It makes my time a lot more fun. And I hope to see and hear from you next week. All right. And if you liked this conversation, please feel free to share it on your Facebook page so we can get more people chatting it up with us. All right, you guys, take care, be well, stay weird.